And I would have loved to have ended with the last budget that was balanced and able to do a tax reduction. However, it is the budget that I am comfortable with because I do think that where, my colleagues and our Premier decided to prioritize in substantive increases is the right thing to do right now. I really, truly am comfortable with those decisions.
Live from the Rotunda here at the Saskatchewan Legislative Building. I'm Adam Hunter, the Provincial Affairs reporter for CBC Saskatchewan. Joining me is Alexander Kwan. We'll be bringing you live coverage this afternoon from inside the Rotunda, grabbing all the reaction from the key stakeholders, from some of the ministers.
We grow as a province, and
we're going to talk to many different people, so please stay with us and let your friends and family know that you're watching our coverage and share that with them. We're going to get into the numbers here. The Finance Minister, Donna Harpower, you just heard from there. We had a chance to talk to her earlier today. We also heard from the Premier, Alex, and the opposition. We're going to take a look at some of the numbers here. The big news today, $273 million deficit for the upcoming year. You see there, revenue is at $19.9 billion, up $184.2 million from last year's budget. Expenses and spending at $20.1 billion, up $1.5 billion from last year's budget. As you heard from Donna Harpower there, she's saying that the government wanted to do something a little bit as far as tax cuts go, but they weren't able to do that. She says they're comfortable because, Alex, they're spending a lot of money, and they are spending with records everywhere. And over my shoulder between us, you can kind of see this backdrop here, and it has a list of record going down there. Education, health, capital projects. Alex, what stood out to you when you heard from the minister today?
You know what, I think the thing that stood out to me most was really that there was no surprises in the budget. A lot of the stuff that kind of was billed as new is stuff that they've actually rolled out over the past few weeks leading up to this. So not a whole lot of new stuff, nothing that screams this is something that is really selling us as a government that is doing everything that it can. So I think that was the thing that stood out to me most.
Yeah, good point. There's no surprises really in here. We know some of the details about what was spent in different areas, but we had a lot of this stuff telegraphed, including the education budget, which the Premier preempted the budget a couple of weeks ago, letting us know that what was being spent there. We also know a little bit about a few of the promises, like money for a breast health center in Regina. That's going to be $3.5 million. That was previously announced. Revenue sharing, another record this year to municipalities. I know we'll hear from Suma and Sarm a little bit later. That was previously announced. So a few of these things, as you said, trickling out, so not a ton of surprises today. What did you hear from the opposition now you were in that news conference with them? What did they have to say?
Well, I think the NDP, their focus during that press conference was cost of living, it's going up, and then mostly that they believe that the province isn't doing anything to deal with that. No cut to the gas tax, no cut to the PST. They really focused on making affordability their message, and just basically saying the provincial government hasn't done enough to get people's attention and earn their trust.
We're going to have a clip of Premier Scott Moe, but in 1 second we're going to look at these projected numbers over the next few years. As I said, $273 million deficit in the upcoming year. Then the government predicting a little surplus of $18 million in a massive budget. That's quite a small number, but they're hopeful for the year after, and then getting into their more optimistic with the surpluses going forward at $225 million and then $339 million. And once again, these budgets are based on projections. This is for the end of the 2024 calendar year, so not the end of the fiscal. And one of the things we heard from the minister this morning was that potash prices are going to be way lower than they have been in the past, specifically 2 years ago when the budget exploded with that $1 billion surplus. The dollar's steady at what has been. The U.S. WTI price is staying steady as well, and marginal growth in the GDP. And that's something I know the opposition also touched on as being that they didn't expect the economy to grow hugely, but that's a different story from what the government's selling, of course.
Yes, absolutely.
We're going to throw to a clip of Premier Scott Moe, who we also heard from earlier today.
As a province, and as we need to build out our services, we need to ensure that we're doing it in a sustainable fashion financially. And so the goal this year was to balance that budget, all the while ensuring that we are making the investments that are necessary in and really the investments that Saskatchewan people expect in their classrooms, in our communities, in healthcare, in our communities.
That's Premier Scott Moe we heard from earlier today. We asked him about a few things, including the teachers' strike that's happening in Saskatchewan on budget day. Thousands of teachers estimated to be here at the legislature. That's wrapped up now, but they were here before 8 o'clock this morning, circling the building, picketing and rallying. We could actually hear them from inside, them chanting, the music, while we were listening to Minister Harpower do her news conference. So that was one thing that was pretty remarkable, actually, when you consider the last few years of budgets here in Saskatchewan have been fairly unique, with the pandemic budget preempting things. They're doing sort of a two-phase budget. We're going to this shot from outside today from our CBC Saskatchewan drone. We had, as you see, the barricades up near the entrance, so the teachers, students, and family members kept away from the front doors, but they were surrounding the building for a number of hours, as I mentioned. We're going to talk a lot about education, and we're going to talk to our Samson a little bit later, who is going to be giving us the scoop on what she heard from outside the building. We're going to throw now to Alex Kwan, who's with a guest. Alex.
Thanks, Adam. This is Gage Hob with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Gage, what's your response to this budget?
Well, it's extremely disappointing to see the Saskatchewan government once again fail to balance the budget. That means more debt, more money spent on interest payments. I was here last year when the government stood up and said there's going to be $1 billion deficit. That didn't happen. Now this year, they're at least telling us there's going to be a deficit. And year after year, they continue to spend more and not look for any places to find savings. Out of the main areas they spend on in this budget, only one is seeing a decrease from last budget. So they didn't even put in that effort to find those savings. That becomes a problem because of that rising debt. We're going to get to $21.1 billion by the end of this year, and then spend $730 million on interest payments this year. That's over $10 million a month, money that can't be used for important programs the government want to spend on, or tax relief of any sort. It simply gets wasted on that interest, and it's disappointing to see that number keep climbing this year.
What do you make about affordability? That was a large thing we heard from the NDP saying, this budget doesn't really address making things more affordable for people. What do you think about affordability in this budget?
Well, I think there wasn't any affordability in this budget. Saskatchewan people are feeling the brunt of high inflation and even higher costs on everything, and the government didn't offer the Saskatchewan family any support of tax relief that would have made it easier for them to make ends meet this year.
Thank you, Gage. So I guess if there is an increasing deficit, what would you have liked to see from the province in this budget?
We would like to see at least any amount of effort. $273 million is a lot of money, but when you're talking the billions that governments spend, it's not too much. So if they would have just spent a couple extra days around that budget deliberations table to get that number down to balance, we could have seen the debt start to go down again, not seen such a huge increase in interest payments, but the government refused to do that, and now Saskatchewan taxpayers are going to be paying for it.
What do you make of no cut to the gas tax? It's something that you and I have talked about before. It's something you've called for, obviously not in this budget. What do you make of that?
Well, it's also disappointing. Saskatchewan is a land of long roads and even longer road trips. So getting that 15 cents a litre taken off our gas would have been great for the average family. Everyone drives to work, drives to hockey practice, drives to everything. It would have gone a long way to help people make ends meet. And it's kind of perplexing to see the government not move forward on something like this because they rail so hard against the cost of the federal carbon tax. But they're doing the same thing for drivers in Saskatchewan. So it's very disappointing to see them not offer any of that relief.
Well, Gage, thank you very much for talking with us. I'll throw it back to Adam now. Adam, back to you.
Thanks so much, Alex. I'm here with Sam Samson, our colleague here at CBC Saskatchewan, our national reporter. And Sam, you were covering the strike outside today and kind of getting a gauge of what people are thinking out there, the teachers and the leadership. What's your main takeaway from what you heard outside today?
Well, to me, there's so much frustration still, and there are so many layers to this because it's been going on for so long, right? The strike action since the beginning of the year. And so we spoke with several teachers, many from Regina, who were able to make it here easily, but even spoke with a couple from Moose Jaw, who made the trip out here to make sure that their voices were heard. I heard the frustration, the concern about, even whatever they get from the budget, which we now know what the province is giving them in the budget, and we knew a couple of weeks ago when the province announced it. It was really like, you know what, that extra funding, it's not going to cut it right now. They want that sustainable, guaranteed funding through bargaining, contracts, et cetera, et cetera. And so, like, I spoke with one English as a second language teacher who just described to me the extra work that she's had to do because there isn't a contract, which led to that strike action. So, for example, like, she has something like 25, 40 students that she's working with just in one school. She's working with 3 different schools. And so because she speaks several different languages, she's taking the phone calls from parents who don't speak English either at all or very well, where like admin from Regina Public can't work with them to help them understand what's going on. Why is my student not able to stay there during lunch hour, or why is their basketball practice canceled? She's the one having to do that. So it's just that extra little bit of, well, not a little bit, extra work that so many teachers have to do. And that's just one example, right, that I heard through, I spoke with like 10 teachers, just one-on-one. And there were a few thousand people out there, I would say. Now, not all of them were teachers. I saw that there were different unions supporting the STF, but it is very clear that they still have a lot of support behind their job action, even though, potentially Hoopla will be affected, the Optimist Band Festival will be affected, even though there's kind of a turning point that we are seeing and experiencing right now with parents and some students very upset with those extracurriculars potentially canceled completely, outright, or just affected in general. Many teachers hope that they can look past it and say, I know it's frustrating. I know. They've been there as students themselves, but they hope that they can look past it and see that what they're fighting for, not only salary increases, but more funding and support for complexity in the classroom and classroom sizes overall.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
We're going to go to Alex now, who's with a guest dealing with the education question. Alex.
Adam, I'm with Jamie Smith Windsor, the president of the Saskatchewan School Board Association. Jamie, what do you make of this budget? Obviously, education is a big topic right now. What do you make of this budget, and do you see anything for school boards?
Yeah, so this is a better budget for education. It does provide a pathway forward for some stability for the education sector. Boards are going to be pleased with a few things, some recognition that there is some room built into this budget for things we've been asking for a long time, such as enrollment growth and recognition, preparing for growth in the province by building schools, recognition of some inflationary increases, such as non-teacher contracts and fuel costs and some of those inflationary pieces. So those are all really positive things, and I think that there's always going to be some acknowledgement that we need consistent, sustainable, predictable funding in education, and we're going to continue to call for that. But this is the kind of budget that, if we can move forward with, is going to really provide some stability for education in the province of Saskatchewan.
Is there anything that you would have liked to see that wasn't included in this budget?
I think this budget does, a good job of recognizing some of the growth that's happening in the province, in particular in some of the urban areas where there's some pressures that we know about. I think there's some opportunity here within the multi-year funding agreement that is historic. It's the first of its kind in the province of Saskatchewan for K-12 education, and that is a recognition of the urgent need to enhance classroom supports for school boards. And I think moving forward with that, we recognize that this is base funding, that this is the floor and not the ceiling. It gives us a place to move forward, to bring back some of those supports that are needed in classrooms, and to have further conversation about what is needed to sufficiently resource our classrooms going forward.
What do you make of the announcement, construction of new schools coming for Saskatoon, Regina, new high school, new elementary school in both cities? What do you make of that?
Well, I think that's acknowledgement of some of those pressures and some of the solutions to addressing a growing province and the growth plan for Saskatchewan is needing space for kids. And I know our boards in our urban centres are going to be relieved. I think they're also going to be looking to get from announcement to ribbon cutting very quickly to catch up to some of those growth needs. And I think the other part of that story is I think it opens up the possibility of having future conversations about what does the future of our rural Saskatchewan schools look like in future budgets, because this was, obviously responding to growth. Yeah.
You mentioned obviously the funding agreement. I guess you said it's base funding, but what would you like to see in the future for funding for classroom supports, for class size? What would you like to see?
Yeah, so that funding, that multi-year funding agreement is going to give boards 4 years of predictability. So boards are going to go back to their communities. They're going to be able to make long-term plans, which is a position that we have not been in before. And boards do a very good job of empowering their staffs, their superintendents, having collaborative processes and conversations with teachers to address the highest needs in each school division. It's important that those dollars are locally driven, locally allocated, and respond to the unique needs of each community. So I think there's an opportunity there. Again, we recognize that this represents the floor, and we need to start having conversations about going forward about what some of those unmet needs may be and what sufficiency looks like in the area of classroom supports. But it's a good starting place.
Jamie, thank you very much for talking with us. Adam, I'll throw it back to you.
Thanks, Alex. I'm here with Randy Golden from the Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association, better known as SUMA. What are your thoughts on the budget? The Premier said today, and we know that it's a record for revenue sharing, municipal revenue sharing. What are your thoughts?
Well, we're very pleased, first of all, to be included in the focus of this year's budget, so classrooms, care, and communities. So that really, we understand that is a focus, and we're pleased to be that. We're happy about the increase in municipal revenue sharing. It's going from $729 million to $850 million, so we're pleased about that, because I think what we've been advocating for is our communities are getting close to at risk. We need this funding. This is predictable, sustainable funding that we can budget with and plan for the future in our villages, resort villages, towns, cities, and northern municipalities.
I know in recent months you've been talking about mental health supports and in all communities. What have you seen in there, and what would you want the government to address specifically when it comes to mental health challenges, addictions, things like that?
Well, that's one of the cornerstones of our association. We've heard this from throughout the province, north, south, east, west, large communities, small communities, is what is happening on the ground in our communities with mental health and addictions. So we understand, and we're pleased with the addition of all the beds, the detox beds, the treatment beds. We're hoping that they can staff all those beds and continue to help with the support in the communities. We'd also would like to see more done with harm reduction. So the theme there is that on the treatment, but we also know that harm reduction plays a huge part in controlling and stopping some of that before it gets to that excess that they now have, the expensive part of treating it.
The government's spending a lot on capital, hospitals, roadways, schools. What stands out to you from some of those commitments from the government?
Well, what stands out is we absolutely need them, and they are in our urban communities. And so now we need to staff them and we need to maintain them. The one concern we have is around the decrease in the northern transportation system. So that's airports, highways, roads, ice roads, and we know that is very much needed there. The fact that there's been that $16 million decrease, we're very concerned about public safety, because that's how you get to the residents, and also on the concern we have around economic development and really what it might do to the economic process up there.
Does this address what you wanted it to for this year for your members?
We're very pleased with many, many things. I did talk about the transportation system in northern Saskatchewan. We're pleased to see the increase to Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency. There have been no increases in the last 5 years. So, of course, the foundational piece to our tax dollars is that assessment that SAMA does. So we're pleased that that has come back, and what we're saying is we hope that that's a good starting point, that needs to be looked at each year.
Ronnie, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Alex, I know you have a guest lined up. Throw it to you.
Thank you very much, Adam. I'm with Brianna Solberg of the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses. Brianna, what was your takeaway from this budget?
Well, obviously for small businesses, the biggest takeaway from this budget is going to be the small business corporate tax rate freeze. That was something that we were really hoping to see in this budget. When we met with the finance minister back in January, we presented that recommendation, and for small businesses that are struggling with rising costs, this tax break is much needed.
What do you make of, I guess, what did you not see in the budget that you would have also liked to be included in there?
Well, we also appreciate this budget has no tax or cost increases, but overall kind of a non-surprising budget. There was nothing too crazy, and I think given that it's an election year, that might have been a bit surprising, but on behalf of small business owners, just can't complain that there's no tax or cost increases, and like I said, that small business tax rate freeze is great.
Brianna, thank you very much for joining us, and I'll throw it back to you, Adam.
Thanks so much, Alex. We're running through guests right now, and that's the door to the assembly behind me. As we zoom out on the rotunda here at the Legislative Building, we're just awaiting Minister Harpower to finish her budget remarks. Then this area will be packed with people. It'll get very loud in here, so hopefully you'll be able to hear us perfectly. We'll do our best to bring you every reaction and the sights and sounds from here. CBC's live coverage of the budget 2024-2025. The big headline today, deficit of $273 million projected for the upcoming year. Government saying it's going to get back into a surplus coming next year, as you see it on your board here. $18 million surplus projected for the year after, then we get to $225 million and into $339 million. So really optimistic for the government that the growing population and some projects here in the province will add to the tax base and also bring in some more revenue. So we look at revenue, $19.9 billion projected for the upcoming year, $20.1 billion in expenses, and $9.7 billion of that revenue is going to be taxes across the province. So that's the biggest chunk of revenue for the government this year. The second, we have also other on-source revenue is another big one. Actually, non-renewable resources is fourth when it comes to how the revenue stacks up, the revenue streams stack up. Look at these are the numbers for the end of calendar 2024, so now on into 24-25. So we look at the oil prices and Canadian dollar, very similar throughout the entire year. GDP with a small increase, also retail sales with a small increase. Potash lower than it's been in the last couple of years, and that's a big story because the government saw a big windfall a couple of years ago, post-pandemic there, with their potash and non-renewable resource revenues, and so those are down. One of the things the government said, as I bring in Alex Kwan again, that 13.5% of all revenues are non-renewable resources. Their target is about 15%, so under that. But the big thing we were asking the Premier about today, Alex, was taxes, because you mentioned earlier the NDP wanted a tax, the fuel tax suspended or cut. Government has said no to that for months. PST didn't get taken off of anything, didn't get reduced. Minister Harpower said she wished she would have been able to do that, but it wasn't possible. What did you think of what the Premier, what did you take away? What did you have to say about specifically taxes, speaking about the carbon tax, which you hear a lot about?
Yeah, I heard him talk a lot about the carbon tax. A lot of the time when we asked him about what was going on and what they were going to do to approach affordability, he would pivot to the carbon tax, which I think is something that we've heard as a refrain quite frequently from him. He would pivot to how they're going to keep the money, going to distribute it to municipalities. So I think from the Premier's perspective, it was a good pivot for him, but a lot of the time we didn't get really an answer on why they chose not to necessarily cut taxes or cut the gas tax.
Yeah, the Premier's response was, and we just talked to Randy Golden from SUMA, who said, that revenue sharing, that tax money goes into revenue sharing, and that's one of the explanations. The other thing we've heard this for a number of weeks now since the government decided to not remit the carbon tax on home heating to Ottawa, that money is sort of their cost relief. That is the tax cut. So that's been a bit of the government's explanation for not having a tax cut. But I thought it was interesting, and it was a great question from our colleague Lisa Schick from CJME, who asked, what did you want to do? Is this the budget you wanted to deliver? And the finance minister said, no. I wish I could have done a tax cut. I wish we were in a surplus and a balanced budget. Only having one balanced budget in the last number of years, and of course that coming off the massive non-renewable resource windfall, and then hopped on by taxes as well. So interesting there to hear from the finance minister. Also, usually the shoes, and I joke that we're doing like the Oscars show, but there's no fashion talk, but we are going to get some fashion talk because the minister didn't have new shoes. That's like a tradition that they've done years and years. And she did say, actually, I did get new shoes. What did she have to say about that?
Yeah, it was actually quite funny because I think it's something that they haven't done in the last few years because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but she did reintroduce it this year in a little bit of a twist. She said Premier Scott Moe took her out, bought her a pair of shoes. We did get to see them. I think it's an interesting twist on all of this. Obviously, it is her final budget. She said she is not going to run in this upcoming provincial election, so I think it was kind of a unique twist, and obviously they're fairly close, so it's something that I think was a neat kind of approach to how to do that kind of tradition, as everybody else has throughout the provinces whenever they release a new budget.
Yeah, that's one we always get the pre-budget announcement. Yesterday it was just the book, which we kind of knew that it was going to be, I should say, the title of this year's budget. There was always a title like We're on Track, Back on Track, Growth That Works for Everyone. Those are some of the ones, the album names, if you will, for the last few years. This one is Classrooms, Care, and Communities. And so they're highlighting the spending on education, which I should say over the whole education piece is $4.4 billion, $3.3 billion for K-12 plus early childhood and libraries, and $2.2 billion of that, and these are really easy to remember because it's 4.4, 3.3, 2.2, I'm not a math major, that is for the K-12 school divisions. And you heard from Jamie Smith-Windsor about how that money will be spent. And of course, the big story today is the strike outside and the implications of that, and what the school divisions, the STF, who are waiting to hear from Samantha Beacott today, we're expecting to hear from her today, as this building will start to overflow with people who are right now just watching the budget. You can kind of see in our shot, there's a TV screen down there. That is a live shot of Donna Harpauer delivering the budget. And for people that haven't been down here for this, she reads the news release, essentially, that we get, and you'll be able to see online on the government's website.
Yeah, I think something that I took away from this budget, especially when you mentioned education, there is that focus on classrooms, there is that focus on education, and I think obviously it's something that they had to address with the STF strikes happening today, the continuing job action that's coming down the pipe. I think it's something that someone really had to emphasize. So I'm not necessarily surprised that it was addressed in the budget. We'll see what the Samantha Beacott says, how she responds, what she, as a takeaway for her, and we'll see if it gets us any closer to a end of job action, obviously planned till the end of this week.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
We'll check in with Alex in a moment. He'll have another guest for us. I'm going to bring in Sam Samson once again, a colleague here at CBC, and Sam's covered news all over the province, and one of the things I know, Sam, you've spent a lot of time covering is the wildfire situation that happened last year. There's a lot of predictions that we're going to have a wildfire season this year with the lack of moisture in Western Canada and Saskatchewan. There are a lot of questions today about emergency preparedness and about drought and crop insurance and also wildfire coverage, and I know you've been looking into this. What's been your takeaway on what the government is and isn't spending on these things?
Well, specifically for wildfires, when we looked into the budget documents, the main thing that they're doing is they are replacing their own fleet of essentially water bombers, planes. And so those new planes won't get here until next year sometime. So there was nothing that we could find in the budget documents that included any emergency preparedness specifically for wildfires. It seems as though the province will pay for those at cost, just kind of waiting to see what happens, and then they will pay for them however they can, whether that be with federal money that other provinces have gotten, especially after last year too. And so it's like a, you know what, we'll wait and see how much it costs, we'll deal with it then situation, which was interesting. And I specifically was looking at that because last year I covered wildfires here in Saskatchewan, specifically like the areas around Stanley Mission. People had to evacuate up north, but then I also covered fires out in Nova Scotia and British Columbia. A lot of our colleagues here helped out when Yellowknife had to be evacuated, right? So it's not just the Saskatchewan preparedness thing. Several different provinces are coming up with ways to prepare for this climate change situation, whether it be droughts or whether it be the effects of wildfires. So to see, I am curious to hear from people once they read the budget, to see what they think about what they are giving toward wildfire to address wildfires as they happen, as well as to help people after they've evacuated, while they're evacuating, if they have to rebuild any communities. Because even though it wasn't, and not to, look, let me say this, people were forced from their homes last summer in northern Saskatchewan. There's no getting around that. But it wasn't as bad compared to past years in Saskatchewan. It was worse in a lot of other provinces, right? So maybe it's not top of mind. I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking, right? But at the same time, Alberta, British Columbia, Northwest Territories, they have all announced different preparedness measures, which included money. And so I am curious to hear from people in Saskatchewan what they wanted to see when it comes to wildfire preparedness and budgeting, and what they see in this year's budget.
And another thing that we're going to be looking into, and I know you're going to be looking into a little bit into the future, is the money maybe that's going towards northern policing, Indigenous police forces. That's something that was asked about today. We're trying to get more details on how that may flesh out, and that's going to be one of the things that always happens with the budget, as you know, that it takes a couple of days for things to kind of filter out and for people to get reaction. So I'm curious to see what the reaction is in northern Saskatchewan, some of those First Nation communities, as to what the provincial government is thinking about policing, RCMP, and that sort of thing, because you covered the inquests and the tragedy at James Smith Cree Nation. So we'll look into that, and we'll hopefully have some more answers in a few days.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, and something that everybody should be looking at, no matter if you are in a First Nation or not, because with this marshal service that the province is putting so many resources toward, it's going to affect everybody in this province. When it comes to those inquests, so there were two inquests, right? There was the 1 and 2 overall, the stabbing that happened in James Smith Cree Nation, September 2022, and then there was the inquest into the death of Miles Sanderson, who died in RCMP custody. Now, from those, there were several recommendations about how to address these different situations, and it was very lengthy and very complicated, but there were a lot of calls to support the RCMP specifically. I don't remember seeing any recommendations to support a marshal service or a provincial police service. So whether or not those recommendations were taken into account for the budget, I have no idea, but I do know that the province received the recommendations that involved them, because that's just protocol from the Coroner's the Saskatchewan Coroner's Service. So I am also interested in what people have to say about how they allocated funding for different police services.
And the Marshal Service, $7 million this year. It won't be operational until 2026, and the Finance Minister is saying today $20 million annually to the Marshal Service in Saskatchewan. We're going to send it over to Alex Kwan, who has a guest. Alex.
Hi there. Thanks, Adam. I'm here with Jim Farney, Director of Policy School at the University of Regina. What did you make of this budget?
I was really surprised by it, to be honest. I never thought I'd see the Saskatchewan Party government, have a deficit that's planned in an election year, and that's kind of exactly what they've done. They've got kind of record spending, record infrastructure investment, and the result is a small deficit projection.
I guess with a small deficit projection, is that a takeaway for maybe it being an election year? What do you make of that?
I mean, we've all had 20 minutes with the budget, so you've got to really dive in. I think it's a result of fairly conservative assumptions on the natural resource revenue side. So that's always swings our budgeting around. kind of middle of the pack economic growth over the next year compared to other Canadian provinces, and fairly high borrowing costs. So all of that kind of trickles through the numbers. But what's fascinating is they've made a bunch of decisions about spending on a wide swath of programs. You can argue about whether or not that investment's enough, but they are making this choice by increasing spending on the program side. And I think that is a kind of clear political decision they've made, that maybe it is more important to invest in public services than it is to emphasize a balanced budget over everything else.
I wanted to get your thoughts on, obviously we had the STF teachers striking outside. There's a lot of focus on education right now. What do you make of the kind of contrast of having teachers protesting outside and then a kind of investment in education? They touted it as a record investment.
I mean, it's stark, right? But I think you could, and the teachers' protests and stuff they're really important practically, but they're an indication of something we're seeing right across the developed world, which is electorates and people going. What's really important is governments that deliver services, and education, healthcare. You pick the sector in which government supplies services in, they're under massive pressure, and so there should be real debate about how that works itself out in the system. But that a right-of-centre government is responding to that type of pressure shouldn't be surprising.
Obviously, this is a provincial election year coming up. What do you make of the budget in the context of it being an election year and, trying to sell the government as a responsible steward for the province?
I think it is, a tilt back towards the center, actually. So we talked about deficits. We see kind of investments that are fairly kind of geographically spread out across the province, which you'd expect. But it's a very managerial budget, and it will give them the threads to pull on and threads for the opposition to pull at, as we're going to see over the next 6 months. But it's more, it is middle of the road. And maybe that is because of the election, maybe it's because of decisions inside cabinet.
The official opposition, the NDP, their response to this budget is it's not. The province didn't do enough for affordability, and more needed to be done. Slash the gas tax, slash the PSD. What do you make of the argument about making things more affordable for people?
It's interesting. I mean, again, we've had the first real inflation in a generation, so it is a crucial question. I'm sometimes surprised watching the NDP argue for tax cuts as the solution to affordability. Like, again, we're in kind of an odd space. We've got a big spending right-wing government and a tax-cutting NDP. But I think it resonates with people. What I think we'll watch as they kind of debate the budget over the next few weeks and then move into election mode is what's the balance between those things and how do the two plans line up. I mean, I think we all know you can't both spend more on services and necessarily cut taxes.
I think one of the things that has been big around this province, obviously, is the carbon tax, choosing not to remit to the federal government. What do you make of that in the context of this budget this year?
In the context of this budget, that's a relatively small piece. I mean, it just is. It's politically important. What you did see that's maybe related is some big investments on energy transition and some big capital investments through Sask Power especially, but some of the other energy-related crowns. And again, I think that's just a reminder to pay attention to what's actually going on rather than maybe always the partisan headlines or the FedProv headlines we see in the news.
Do you see anything that maybe you are surprised wasn't there in this budget? I think the surprise is the top line. There's the continuation of a tax cut for small business, but no new taxes. They were coming in with having already signaled, the relatively modest new things they had, and some of what was big and exciting, the labor market plan that they announced, the international investment attraction piece that they've announced, are things that are important in terms of regulation, but have really small budget numbers attached to them. So I think it's a government that's kind of moving through, but the spends are in existing areas. I guess when you see a budget like this, where there isn't a big new thing, that was kind of like not previewed in the weeks before this budget, What do you take away from that? That a lot of the stuff they did announce in this budget that is new was kind of rolled out in the weeks ahead.
So there's a famous quote by an Ontario premier, a guy named Bill Davis, who led a long-running Tory dynasty in the 70s and 80s. And Davis would always say, boring works. This government usually does not have surprises in its budget. It's been in for a long time. Surprises happen in the economy and they react, but I would be surprised to see them have like some big shiny thing front and center. They're moving a little bit, a whole bunch of levers, and have gotten quite adept at that.
When it is a bunch of small levers like this and kind of maybe moving a little bit to the center like you mentioned, do you think it appeals to the electorate a little bit more, or they're trying to appeal to the electorate a little bit more as this is an election year?
What's going to happen in this budget and in this set of incentives is as we get closer to the election, they'll pull it apart and start micro-targeting us, right? So the days of a single message that you and I can have one conversation about are over. It will be bits and pieces of targeted Facebook ads, of social media stuff, where they will identify, key swing voters and reach out and say, we've done this that's concrete for you this year, and the NDP in opposition will say they failed to do X or Y for you. That's just how the game's played now. So again, lots of little things here to attack and defend over.
The Saskatchewan Teachers Federation was protesting outside. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on where this goes now in terms of, job action is still planned for the rest of the week. Obviously a day-long strike like today where they made a big public show of being outside the legislature during the budget. What do you think happens next, or is it impossible to tell what happens next?
I think if you're the players on the inside of either side and you've got access to polling and you're hearing from people on the street, you would have a sense of where it's going. Fundamentally, it's a battle for public support and credibility. For you and I, without that type of access, I think it is impossible to say.
Jim, thank you very much for talking with us, and we'll throw it back to Adam.
Thanks, Alex. Some great insight there from Jim Farney. Always appreciate him spending time with us. We're going to take a look at some budget figures right now. This is the budget projection for next year. Again, a $273 million deficit, $19.9 billion in revenue, expenses $20.1 billion. Some of that is going to capital projects, $180 million for the Prince Albert Victoria Hospital, $55 million for Weyburn General Hospital, $27 million for the LaRange Long-Term Care Home, $22 million to complete the Regina General Hospital Parkade, $617 million for roads, $2.6 billion for Crown Utilities and Infrastructure, and $216 million for school infrastructure. We're going to hear from the finance minister, who the media talked to earlier today, on her thoughts on her final budget.
And I would have loved to have ended with the last budget that was balanced and able to do a tax reduction. However, it is the budget that I am comfortable with, because I do think that where my colleagues and our premier decided to prioritize in substantive increases is the right thing to do right now. I really, truly am comfortable with those decisions.
I'm here now with Bashir Jello, the head of the healthcare with QP. Bashir, what are your thoughts on today's budget and what was spent? It was a record healthcare budget. I know there was a lot of concerns about retention, recruitment of healthcare workers. We've talked to you in the past about that. What did you see in the budget as far as that part of the budget?
I think we just received the budget now. It's a cold version. We still got some few days to dig into what it is. But I think what we see in this budget, there's been quite a lot of talk about recruitment and retention before in the past, but we have not seen that come into fruition completely. I mean, even in the budget today, they only talk about 262 people they trained to come and about 40 for international. But nothing, there's nothing, I was listening, I saw nothing about retention. Now we've heard very clearly they talk about buildings in the province. We have the urgent care facility that is being built in Regina, but right now they are struggling to staff that building. That's a huge investment. And the best way you're going to be able to attract people in healthcare is to work on retention. If you just let people come in without allowing them to stay, that is no use to us. So if you are going to build big building, build this building, but you have to be able to staff it. And one of the reasons how you can staff those buildings is to work on retention. Retention meaning try to work to improve the work environment. We've had the same promises before. We heard about this about 3. I've been coming there for 3 years now. We heard about the 300 that was promised about CCAs about 3 years ago, and up till now we go around this problem. Go to the long-term care facilities. These people are overstaffed. So yes, we can build buildings, which is great. Yes, we do appreciate the 4.5% increase in healthcare, but you have to focus on retention. We also heard the federal government giving some money, and we have been here before. We saw during the pandemic the federal government gave money, but that money did not flow to frontline. We are looking forward to see this money going to the frontline services. That is the only way that is going to make a difference in this province.
Yeah, you're referencing the money that was announced earlier this week, the federal transfer, about 560 million.
560 million.
And there's 300 plus million there, and it was, different areas where they're focusing. One was on recruitment and retention. What do you need to see from the health minister, from the two health ministers, as far as how that money is going to flow into, as you mentioned, frontline care?
Number one, focus on retention. They have always been focusing on recruitment, and it's been very reactive. That is, there is a crisis here, let's go outside and bring people to come in. But we have seen that. They've also talked about recruitment and bringing people from other provinces into here. But those people, when they come, when they realize that the pay in this province is lower compared to Western Canada provinces, they are leaving. I can tell you list classifications. And they talk about this. In this budget, I heard they talk about 5.1 million for medical imaging. I listened to that. It's great. They talk about an improvement in funding to keep breast cancer assessment in this province. We saw that. How are you going to do that? The only way you're going to do that is no magic, is to have staff. But if you cannot staff that, if you cannot do anything to retain people, those who are the people that do this breast assessment clinic in this province? We have the MRTs that do that. But those MRTs, if you look at the salary across Western Canada, Manitoba, Alberta, and British Columbia, the wages are much higher. They bring people in when they are new, they are graduating from school. But then once they get 2 or 3 years behind their belt, they are leaving. So what we want to see now, we want to see a focus on recruitment and retention, and also improving the work environment in these places.
We talked about long-term care and continuing care. I know the federal government, part of that money this week was for allowing people to have long-term care in their home community where they live. The provincial government has talked about that as well. We've talked about continuing care and long-term care and the lack of healthcare. You mentioned promises made in the past. What do you need to hear from the government? What did you hear today as far as in that piece? We're talking about different areas of healthcare. I know you represent a lot of different healthcare workers, but we'll focus on seniors and long-term care. What can you talk about in that area?
In Regina today, for every single available health long-term care bed, you have 80 people competing for that. Every single one that comes available, you have 80 people. So what you need to do, we are talking about building long-term care. There was a story about Grenfell. We are still that to come to fruition. If you have a statistics that is this daunting, for every single bed that is available, you have 80 people who are competing for that. It's no magic. What you need to do is to have more long-term care facilities, invest in long-term care facility, and staff this building. Staff it, because what is happening right now, if you have the hospitals are over capacity because we don't have spaces in the long-term care facilities. When somebody go into the marriage, instead of them staying for a day or two, they are staying longer because they don't have the spaces. So our seniors end up going to the hospitals and they are on these places. Recently, 2 days ago, I was at the Amesview former extended care facilities. What they are trying to do now is to take people who go to the hospital for acute care services. Because they don't have these spaces there, what are they doing? They are taking them to these long-term care facilities. These long-term care beds should be there for our senior citizens, not an overflow of patients from Pasco Hospital or General Hospital. So we want to see this money going to retention. Build these places, make sure we work together to reduce the number of wait times for people getting into healthcare services in our long-term care facilities.
Bashir, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
So Bashir Jello from QP, representing healthcare workers all across the province, and you talked about, we covered a lot of ground there, representing long-term care, continuing care, also people that will be working in the breast assessment center in Regina that's going to be completed at some point next year. $3.5 million in this budget to make that happen. The government announcing that a few weeks ago, one of the pre-budget announcements of things that were in the budget. We didn't have the details of the cost. We have that now. The government saying at that time, and those in that field saying, the doctors involved saying, one of the biggest issues was having somewhere where people could work under one roof, that there was a lot of separation when it comes to diagnostics, when it comes to doctors getting assessments, and so people could go to one space. It's going to be at Regina Center Crossing on Albert Street and Dudney Avenue, and they're expecting that to be open sometime next year. Bashir also talked about the Regina Urgent Care Center. We had an announcement this week. Federal Health Minister Mark Holland making that announcement with Everett Hindley and Tim McLeod, the two health ministers in Saskatchewan. That Urgent Care Center is expected to be open sometime this summer in Regina, as you heard from Bashir and others. I also heard Tracy Zambori from Sun this week we talked to, and she said the key there is to staff that center properly. If it's not staffed, it's not going to have any success. And the health minister agreed. He said the same thing. So we'll have to see how that center is staffed when it does open in summer of 2025. As you take a nice look at my shiny dome, we're inside under the legislative dome here at the legislative building in Regina. People starting to come out of the budget address. We've talked to a number of different stakeholders. We're expecting to hear later from Samantha Beacott with the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, or a representative from the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, perhaps some post-secondary leaders, maybe the mayors. We're not sure exactly who all is in the building inside. We're waiting to hear from them. And we'll, of course, hear from the opposition members. We did already hear from opposition finance critic Jerome Wotherspoon and the opposition leader Carla Beck, who, as Alex Kwan talked about earlier, were critical of the government not having more for cost of living relief. So that's one of the things that they're concerned about right now. They asked for a tax cut to the fuel tax, 15-cent provincial fuel tax. The government has said that they're not interested in doing that. They said that money goes towards paying for roads. And one of the big things this week is we wanted to, and today, if you want to get a sense of what the government's messaging is on today's budget, it's record spending in education, record spending in health, and of course, some of you are probably expecting, okay, well, there's record spending, the cost of everything is going up, interest rates are higher. Well, that is also true, and that's one of the things we don't see on our board. What I will tell you is that the debt is forecasted to grow to $34 billion, growing by $3 billion this year. Revenue projected at $19.9 billion. It's up 184-ish million from last year's budget. Expenses, of course, up, and that's why we do have a deficit. The government projecting a smaller surplus next year, about $18 million, then into the 200 and 300s in the following budget years. You heard from Jim Farney with the School of Public Policy talking about the government running a deficit budget in an election year, that was a bit surprising to him. We see the numbers there on your screen. As I mentioned, that small surplus projected not this upcoming year, which is a deficit, but the year after, and then larger surpluses from there. We're going to have small surplus in a year or so, and that raised some eyebrows, I know, from the opposition, but the government pointing out, of course, and we're heard today in the legislature that the government has been critical of the opposition, saying, well, you want tax cuts, you want us to spend more, you want to spend in certain areas, how are we paying for this? And so that's a bit of the back and forth that we've heard over the last number of days. As always, we know the devil is in the details, so a lot of the spending in education and social services and health, we'll have to see how this money flows out. One of the things the government has really focused on this year is capital spending. The finance minister saying that was one of the main things that her colleagues and the premier wanted, was that they were going to spend in this budget, and they have done that, spending up almost right across the board when it comes to different government areas. So that's something that we've seen that's been something that people should be aware of, that there's kind of this record spending going. So we're going to check in with Alex Kwan in a moment here, who's going to have a guest for us. But before we do, I'll just remind you that we're going to expect to hear from the SDF leadership who's here. Of course, the strike circling the building here at the legislature today. And right now, we're going to throw to Alexander Kwan, my colleague, who has a guest. Alex.
Thanks, Adam. I'm here with Peter Gilmer, the pastor at the Regina Anti-Poverty Ministry. Peter, what do you see in this budget for people who are in need of assistance?
Not nearly enough. That's the big concern. Is it in an election budget when you would expect that there would be something offered to a cross-section of groups? What we're looking at for people on income assistance, people with significant enduring disabilities on the SED program or on the CIS program is just a 2% increase. Given how woefully inadequate these rates are, how low these rates are, that just doesn't cut it. And people have been falling further and further behind because of inflationary pressures. And this really does nothing to deal with the real cost of living concerns that people have.
Obviously, a 2% rate hike, I guess, is not a whole lot, like you said. For people who are relying on these programs, what does that mean for them? Is it enough? Does this do more for them?
It really does. I mean, it doesn't even really keep up with the cost of living, plus all the catch-up that's needed because these rates have fallen so far behind over the course of many years. So people just don't have what they need to meet their most basic needs, and this doesn't deal with relief for the people who need it the most. I guess the other issue for us, of course, is the housing question, the crisis in terms of lack of affordable housing. And while there is sounds like there's some commitment in terms of upgrade, in terms of social housing stock, we are presently sitting with 3,000 vacant units in the province, 700 in the city of Regina alone. Making sure that those are brought up to speed and that they can be made use of as quickly as possible would be a very wise investment. And the fact that we're wasting all that resource right now at a time when there is such a crisis in terms of lack of affordable housing, such a crisis in terms of homelessness, that's a big concern.
Were these budgetary decisions, the ones that were made and announced today, are they a surprise to you or unexpected? What is your takeaway?
Well, to be honest, we really didn't know what to expect, but we had held out some hope that we would see a little bit more significant boost in terms of benefits for people on the SED and the CIS program, and also that there would be a greater commitment in terms of the social housing portfolio and making sure that we're making best possible use of the resources that we have available. That didn't happen. There was a small commitment in terms of the child care portfolio and early childhood education. However, the reality is that Saskatchewan remains a child care desert with the lowest child care coverage in the country, and this does very little to close the gap in regard to that as well. So whether it's income security, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's child care, the reality is that this budget is failing. And I mean, there's also the reality that we continue to have the lowest minimum wage in the country. They did promote the incentive program, the Saskatchewan Employment Incentive, which is a new program, but is really very similar to the old Saskatchewan Employment Supplement, really doesn't change much from the past. And working families need supports, as do those who, through no fault of their own and through significant enduring disability, are left outside of the labor force. We need to have a stronger social safety net. This budget doesn't deliver.
What are you seeing from people on the ground who are relying on these programs, who are maybe without a home? What are you hearing from people, and what are you seeing in the past year?
Well, I mean, we've had really skyrocketing rents over the course of the last year, and we've also had a vacancy rate drop across the province, and certainly within Regina, but all of our major centres, and really throughout the province, we're seeing dangerously low vacancy rates. So we all already had an affordable housing crisis. We already had a homelessness crisis before we were dealing with that recent rise in rents, the recent low vacancy rate. So now we're in much worse position, I think, and we really need to be heading that off, because if we think things are bad now, if we don't invest now and make sure that people can meet their most basic needs, we're going to have a much greater crisis in a few years down the road.
Peter, thank you very much for talking with us.
Thank you.
I'll throw it back to you, Adam. Adam Hunter.
Thanks, Alex. And that was Peter Gilmore from Regina. I want to read a news release we just got to our newsroom. As of 3 p.m. this afternoon, there's been no notice that sanctions being implemented at midnight will be removed due to the withdrawal of extracurricular on Thursday, March 21st and Friday, March 22nd. All SHSAA activities are canceled on those dates. Through discussions with both groups involved and negotiations, the SHSAA was unable to determine if there would be any immediate solution to the impasse. Therefore, it was with great regret that Hoopla 2024 is canceled. The Board of Directors is extremely saddened by the outcome. For over 75 years of operation, teacher volunteers, with the support of our members of the school boards of Saskatchewan, have been the backbone of our association. We are extremely grateful. It's for volunteer coaches that drive school sport. As individuals that live school sport every day, the SHSAA board members are fully aware of the disappointment that exists amongst our student athletes and coaches. As of Saturday, March 23rd, is the final day of the SHSAA basketball season. Teams that qualified for Hoopla are invited to participate in a one-day provincial basketball championship in Moose Jaw. Each team involved in the celebration of high school basketball will play one game against another opponent on their seeding and are encouraged to take the atmosphere by cheering on other teams. For those who value the philosophy of school sport, the last few days have continued to provide examples of opportunities for students to develop skills through the school sport environment. The statement goes on. We'll have more coverage on this decision a little later, and you can check our website as well. But Hoopla, as a full tournament is canceled, they're going to host a one-day event in Moose Jaw on Saturday. I'm going to bring in my colleague on the political panel with CBC Saskatchewan Post Media's Murray Mandrick. And Murray, what's your takeaway from today's budget? We heard from Jim Farney, who said he was surprised that there was a deficit being run in an election year, but what's your takeaway?
Running a deficit in an election year less surprises me than the fact that they didn't spend more in some ways. I thought it would be a lot splashier. I thought we'd see bigger tax increases, or tax decreases, I apologize. I thought we'd see a lot more things that were kind of more grabby, I guess, more intriguing. Is election budget. It's not really much of an election budget. It doesn't really address their problem area, which obviously the cities, obviously issues related to teachers, settling the contract. There's a few things related to social services. I like some of the health agenda stuff, but generally I don't think this budget is going to please many, and I think that's really ironic because I think they tried to please everybody, and it's just one of those things when you try to please everybody, you please nobody.
And you end up
become a columnist.
you end up having a situation where they're spending records. Like you see the board over here, it's record, and that's capital spending records, it's education spending records. Of course, the cost of everything is going up, interest rates are going up, so things are going to cost more. But you're saying that they weren't able to cut taxes. Even when they had $1 billion surplus, they decided not to. Do you think they wish they would have done that then? It sounded like the Minister of Finance had a bit of regret saying that she couldn't cut taxes in her final budget.
Or wish they didn't because they'd be stuck with it this year, and the foundation of the budget doesn't support it. If you're having to tell everybody you're breaking records, you're probably not breaking records that are of that much importance. And I think that that's probably one of the things. There's a hard sell with this budget about how good it is, and you're going to hear a lot more than that, a lot more of that, because that's what happens with election budgets every year. But I don't think the substance of the budget is going to support the sell. And as you point out, yes, it's the biggest ever. You know, I just set a record for being the oldest I've been. So, like, I know, I'm probably impressed with that record more than anything else I've written. But yeah, honestly, it's not the kind of thing that I think grabs a lot of attention, and I don't know why that is. I think maybe they got consumed with other issues, practical problems. It almost looks like a mid-year term budget than a election one, and that's kind of the one thing that's kind of did surprise me a little bit.
And I want to ask you about what happened outside today with Have you seen something like that? I haven't seen in recent budgets where there was a strike happening the day of the budget, and we just got word that Hoopla as a full tournament will be canceled for Thursday and Friday because they don't have, obviously, the teacher volunteers to run that tournament. What do you make of what happened outside and the ongoing, impasse and labor dispute between the Teachers Federation and the government?
Well, to be honest with you, I've been diligently writing, so I haven't been paying too much attention of what teachers were saying outside. I think it's problematic for Hoopla, for the teachers, if Hoopla is canceled, because it ultimately is their decision. It might sound like government spin when they say let the kids play and everything else, and maybe there's sort of an argument that teachers can tie to the intransigence of government not wanting to move on, but still their decision. They didn't have to do this. They could have basically carried on with Hoopla or wherever else, and I don't think that's a particularly great strategy for them at this particular point, because I don't think you win anything. I think you just alienate types, and they're obviously playing the slow game in terms of their contract negotiations. So why they would have to do this at this particular point, I don't know. I'm not a union strategist, so maybe something I don't get. I don't think it's going to work for them. I don't know if it's something that's going to turn the tables, because we now know what's in the budget, and those paying attention probably know the problem of what's in the budget, and that is that it might not be in the budget next year, and that tends to be the teacher's argument. I think it's legitimate enough. I don't know if most people really care about that as much as they care about kids losing activities.
Murray, thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Take care.
It's Murray Mandrick, my colleague on the Morning Edition political panel. Plug for us, listen to us every Friday morning at 7:40 with Stephanie Langanger. We're also on Saskatoon morning at about 10 after 7 on Fridays. My thanks to Murray Mandrick for his time and his expertise as always. You can hear it, I'm sure. It's filling up, it's getting louder. I just turned my earpiece down because it was blasting in my ears. These guys are all coming out of the Legislative Assembly to now, we'll get some reactions from ministers. We'll get reactions from also some of the opposition members. We're expecting and we're anticipating hearing from Samantha Beacott from the STF very shortly. We are going to get Trent Wotherspoon right now with our Alexander Kwan. He's the finance critic for the NDP. Alex.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Adam. Trent, I guess, what do you make of this budget? What do you make of the spending? What do you make of everything that's here in this budget?
Well, it's one of these budgets that you really know you just can't be trusted. It's really disappointing for folks that there's not a stitch of cost of living relief in this budget. You see all sorts of spending in different areas, dollars that are being wasted, but nothing to provide relief for people and families who are struggling with the cost of living in such a significant way. It doesn't surprise me, sadly, at this point. This Sask Party government is completely out of touch with the cost of living realities and pressures that people are facing. We've seen that year to year as they've actually added onto those costs, piled on with taxes and costs, made that challenge worse instead of providing some relief. So it's a budget that offers no relief on the cost of living, and I'd say can't be trusted, because we've seen how this government manages our finances, squanders opportunity, and piles on the debt, which ultimately we all pay for.
What would you have liked to see in terms of a program or cuts to make it more affordable for people in the province?
We've been calling for a suspension to the 15 cent per liter that's a tax that's applied to gas and diesel. This is what's happened in Alberta and Manitoba, to the provinces to both sides of us. This would give a break to families at the pumps. Many families are breaking the bank just to fill the tank and feeling the pressures in so many areas. This would be one solid measure that would put hundreds of dollars back in the pockets of families who desperately need it. We get many families right now that are making that incredibly tough choice between groceries and power bills and rent. making tough choices between whether they can keep their kid in the activity that they love or whether they can pay their mortgage. They really should have stepped up. That was one measure. They could have rolled back some of the PST they've piled on. They've added PST in a historic way, the biggest tax hike in Saskatchewan's history. Average families now paying $1,500 more per year for that PST. So those would have been two measures that could have been easily acted on by this government.
The province is forecasting a deficit for this year. What do you make of that, and what do you make of the province forecasting such a deficit?
You know, we've come to learn that we really can't trust the Sask party with the finances or with their budgets or what they say on budget days. You know, this premier has run 5 deficits out of 6 budgets. The one that was balanced was an extraordinary year, a bit of a fluke by way of other circumstances that contributed to that. Otherwise, it's been a premier that hasn't been able to get the job done, claims that it's going to be balanced on budget day, then has projects go off the rails, budgets go sideways, and waste dollars hand over fist. And we see that with things like the runaway costs on IT projects that are over $100 million for a project that doesn't even work. We've seen it with the bypass, the GTH. We see it with choices like sending women from Saskatchewan to Calgary for mammograms to actually a Sask party donor at a cost of 10 times more. We see it with the redundant, more costly Marshals service. Instead of investing on putting boots on the ground in a more effective way today in frontline policing and the RCMP, we see this kind of waste and squandered opportunity on front after front. So we just don't have any faith with the Sask party when it comes to our public finances, and see no reason for the public to trust what they see today.
Trent, thank you very much for speaking with us. Adam, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Thanks, Alex. I'm here with the Minister of Health, Everett Hinley. Thanks for joining me, Minister. What stands out to you from today's budget? What do you want people to take away from what's being spent in health?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I think there's some significant announcements in healthcare. A record budget for the Ministry of Health, record investments, a 10.6% increase overall in the health budget. And there's a number of initiatives that stand out for us, I think, for me personally as the Minister. A couple of announcements that are in there today around the enhancement of cancer services in this province. A record amount of dollars going towards the Saskatchewan Cancer Agency. We made an announcement a couple of weeks ago around breast health in this province. So the establishment of a new breast health center here in Regina that's been advocated for by patients. We have a patient here today who's met with me on a number of occasions to talk about why this is important, how this is a significant investment. Also, $1 million towards ovarian cancer research. That's a significant investment as well. Plus $1.2 million towards enhanced gynecological cancer therapies here in our province. So I think we really wanted to take a focus on women's health here in our province, as well as in improving access and treatment for cancer.
Talked to Bashir Jallo from CUPE, who talked about the importance of staffing and retention, and I know you've heard that from Sun and others. And when they specifically talk about urgent care centers and long-term care, what's the government doing in this budget, and how's this money being spent to focus on that retention aspect specifically? Sure, we continue to build upon our Health Human Resources Action Plan that was first announced a couple of years ago with a specific focus on rural and remote communities. So there's additional funds in this year's budget to make sure we continue to do that. For example, the 250 new permanent full-time positions out across Saskatchewan, continuing to annualize that. When it comes to the urgent care center here in Regina, it is nearly completed. When it comes to construction, it will open this summer, and it will be staffed, which we need to have. And I know that we've had those conversations. The officials and the teams have been working very hard on that during the construction phase, on a parallel path to make sure that we are able to recruit and train and hire the staff we need to operate the urgent care center. And that's going to have a significant impact, I think, on helping to reduce visits into ERs, to sort of redirect and triage those patients where they can be better served. Plus, the urgent care center in Regina will also have a separate intake for mental health and addictions, which is also a very, very important component of our health budget. More dollars for mental health and addictions in this budget, and we want to make sure that we continue to do everything we can to hire those staff, more training seats, so that we can have more people working in our healthcare facilities. What should people look at as far as what's happening in their community? I know communities and care are two of the kind of highlights of this budget. And I know the government's spending money all over the province, but when it comes to their community, what should they look out for? Is it access to care? Is it access to primary care no matter where they live? Is it being able to have care later in life when they're in their community?
I'd say it's all of the above, Adam. And I think just to give one example, we shared last week a few details around our expansion of nurse practitioners in this province. There's more details. There's dollars tied to that in the budget announcement today, where we have already a nurse practitioner clinic operating in the city of Ormond. Construction is nearly complete on one in Martensville. We announced that there's going to be at least 25 more positions that are funded for nurse practitioners in this budget. I would say that's a start, and you'll see more in the months and years ahead, plus the addition of a couple more pilot projects around nurse practitioner-led, independently operated, but nurse practitioner publicly funded clinics in addition to Ormond and Martensville that you'll see, and we'll be working very closely with the Saskatchewan Association of Nurse Practitioners about how do we fill those gaps, how do we find communities where we need nurse practitioners, we need primary care access for people right across this province, whether it's in Regina or Saskatoon, or if it's in rural and remote communities. And we'll work very closely with them, with locally, municipally elected leaders. I think that's an example of where you'll see some of the benefits to people in their own communities.
I know this is in your file, but you've been on this file. I just talked to Randy Golden from SUMA, who said harm reduction is still one of their focuses. They'd like to see the government take more of a step in that direction. They've kind of stepped away from some areas of harm reduction and what advocates are asking for. What can you tell me about how that money and that issue is being dealt with the government and some of the concerns from SUMA?
Yeah, I think what you're going to be seeing from us and have already seen from the provincial government is the move towards a recovery-oriented system of care, adding more treatment spaces. When I had the honor to serve as the first Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, we set a target to add 150 more treatment spaces in this province. We've since hit that target and filled those and created those spaces. Now, even more ambitious targets to create more treatment spaces for people. That's ultimately what we want to get people to do, is to have the access through a single point of entry into the health system when it comes to addictions treatment and recovery. We hear about it all the time, and we want to make sure that we're creating these treatment spaces, whether it's pre-treatment, detox, treatment itself, post-treatment beds. We need to make sure we have that full continuum of care, that we're providing those treatment options for people, regardless of where they live in Saskatchewan.
Thanks, Minister.
Thanks, Adam.
That's the Health Minister, Everett Hindley. Thank you to him for joining us right now. We are going to, we're awaiting still hearing from Samantha Beacott from the SDF. Alex Kwan will have that for us in just a moment. As you can see behind me, I'll step out of the way, there is a large number of people here now in the rotunda. We see our shot from up top of the dome. We have, I'm just looking around here to see I can spot, and there's a lot of people chatting with different groups. We're going to check in a second with a couple of guests. We're expecting to still hear from the Minister of Education, Jeremy Cockrell, as well, who's making his way through the rotunda. Two of the people that I think many people on this, if you're watching from home or on your phone, you want to hear from the Minister of Education and from the head of the STF, because today, of course, was strike day for Saskatchewan teachers, picketing outside of the legislature earlier today for most of the morning and part of the afternoon. And so that was one of the things that overshadowed, I think, a lot of the discussion today was just that strike that was happening. And we're going to look at the budget today, $270.2 million deficit, revenue there at $19.9 billion projection, expenses at $20.1 billion. That's the projection for the upcoming year. The government's saying that they're expecting to be in a situation where they're going to be in a surplus in just 1 year time. So projecting an small $18 million surplus in 25-26 and a $225 million surplus in 26-27. 27-28, a $339 million surplus. So the government with an optimistic surplus projection going forward here in the next number of years. And so that's something they talked about today, being hopeful that the population will continue to grow, that the economy will grow, that the tax base will go. And I'm going to throw now to our Alexander Klon, who's standing by with the Minister of Education. Alex.
Adam, thank you very much. I'm here with Jeremy Cockrell, Minister of Education. Jeremy, what do you want to tout in this budget? What do you think is the takeaway for people who might be at home, want education to be addressed?
Absolutely. Well, we've heard loud and clear from parents and teachers around the province that more investment in education is needed. 100% agree. In this budget, we're seeing the largest ever increase to school operating funding, an additional $180 million to our 27 public, Catholic, and Francophone school divisions around the province. But in addition to that, what we've also announced, $212 million capital budget, an increase of almost 47% to education capital in the province, announcing 9 new schools in the province, as well as 2 major renovations, a couple minor capital projects as well. And again, you look at that, the 9 new schools, there'll be 4 new schools in Regina, 4 new schools in Saskatoon. We know that we're seeing significant growth in the 2 large cities in our province, and again, building these new schools is going to have a significant impact in terms of making sure that students have excellent facilities to go to school in, and that we're handling the consequences of growth in this economy.
Is it good that we are facing such growth in this province that we kind of have to start building out these schools? Do we need to build them faster? Do you think that we need to, or do we have a good handle in terms of growth and capacity?
Yeah. Well, I think growth is a great thing for this province, right? I mean, you look at the investments that government's been able to make in this budget and in previous budgets as well. That only comes from a strong and growing economy, right? We've seen years in this province, under the NDP where the economy's been declining. We haven't been able to make those same investments. We've told people to go out and fix their own highways, seen schools close, seen hospitals close. Obviously, as we grow and as we grow quickly, that does mean we need to build schools and hospitals, and we need to build them faster. This budget does exactly that. We're a significant capital increase from last year's budget, and again, addressing some significant capital needs that we have in Regina and Saskatoon, and I think that's good news for Saskatchewan students.
Outside today, obviously a lot of teachers protesting, kind of hard to miss. What's your message to them? They want to, they're coming and trying to talk to you. What do you want to say to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, when it comes to where we're at with bargaining, it's a frustrating situation, right? It's frustrating for teachers who I know want to be in the classroom. It's frustrating for, the many students that have joined us at the legislature here over the last several days who want to be playing basketball this weekend in Moose Jaw, or want to be playing their musical instrument of choice in band festivals and so on, and students who are quite frankly worried about graduation events coming up and how that might be affected by sanctions of the STF leadership. Again, as I've said before, Saskatchewan invests higher per capita in education than anywhere else in the province. We've made additional significant investments in this year's budget and multi-year commitments with our 27 school boards. It's really time for the STF leadership to come back to the table. I think we agree on far more than we disagree on, and there's a path forward to a deal, and it's time for both sides to be at the table.
So we just got word that Hoopla is officially canceled. It's no longer going ahead. Yeah. Can I get you to respond to that news?
Incredibly disappointing. Incredibly disappointing. I mean, as I said yesterday and today as well, I mean, the reality is that the STF leadership chooses specific sanction days to target certain activities. They've done that with Hoopla. They've done that with band festivals. And certainly I'm worried they may do that with graduation activities as the school year progresses. I just think it's incredibly disappointing. I met with students who've traveled here today from Priestville and Norquay and Sturgis who they should be practicing tonight. They should be getting ready to go to Moose Jaw and get ready to play games this weekend. And again, because of the decisions by union leadership, they're not.
A big thing from the union is saying they want classroom complexity and class size in their collective agreement in a new contract. You said that's not going to happen. I guess my question for you is why?
The reason that we're not going to negotiate class size complexity in a provincial agreement is because we believe in the local autonomy of our 27 school boards. The reality is that the 27 school divisions, they represent communities that vary so much, right? I was up in the Losh on Friday. I've been to small rural communities. I've sat down with the Saskatoon and Regina public school divisions. The reality is we need to have an agreement that doesn't handicap school divisions to make decisions that are right for their local school communities, and negotiating those items in a provincial contract would do exactly that.
But I guess doesn't that, and having it negotiated in a contract, doesn't that guarantee that funding will be coming for new kids, for new classrooms? Why not ensure that in a collective agreement instead of maybe just relying on school boards to address it?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the local school divisions are the operators of the school. They're the employers of teachers around the province. We've made that multi-year funding commitment. We've made the commitment that classroom supports funding is going to be there. We've made several commitments in our budget, as we have in previous budgets, that we're going to be building new schools, that we're going to be funding enrollment growth. And so, again, we've made those commitments, and it's time for both sides to be at the bargaining table, and we need to get a deal done. We need to get a deal done for our kids.
What's your message to the teachers that were outside today protesting? What's your message to union leadership?
You know, I would I certainly recognize that folks have the opportunity and the right to come and express their opinion, but I would encourage them to call their leadership and tell them to get back to the table.
Jeremy Cockrell, that was the Education Minister. Thank you very much for having us. Adam, I will throw it back to you.
Thanks, Alex. And we're going to hear from the education critic for the opposition, Matt Love. We just heard from Jeremy Cockrell there talking about disappointment that hoopla has been canceled for Thursday and Friday, and saying that he believes that class size and complexity should be up to boards, the 27 elected school boards. First of all, I want to get your thoughts on hoopla not going forward for at least 2 days because of job action from the teachers. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I share in the disappointment. We know our student athletes and our dedicated teacher coaches want to see this go forward, but the fact of the matter is that there's one person in this province that could make a decision, one person who has the power to do that, and that's the Minister of Education. At every step of the way, teachers have offered a path forward. He said no at every possible turn, and he's the one getting in the way. Teachers have asked for this to go to binding arbitration, a fair process, a reasonable concession made by teachers. This minister needs to get out of the way and let a fair and independent arbitrator make a decision.
What do you make of his argument that I know you've heard that this should be left up to the school divisions? They're elected, they have different interests and different needs in different parts of the province. You're an ex-teacher. What do you make of that argument?
You know, that's not that different than what the teachers have put forward. They don't want to get in the way of local boards making decisions. What they want is guaranteed funding in a contract given to local boards to decide where those supports go. This minister time and time again has offered up misleading statements to the public about what teachers are asking for. In fact, this Sask Party government, they're the ones that have taken away board autonomy. They're the ones that have taken powers away from local boards and given those powers to the minister. So I'd say to the minister, with the powers that he's taken away from local boards, he needs to now show responsibility. Deliver that sustainable, that adequate funding that our students need in a contract to teachers.
I know you're outside meeting with the teachers that were here striking at the legislature today. What did you take away from what they said to you, and what did you make of the strike and the rally outside today?
You know, I'm in awe of Saskatchewan teachers. They're standing up for their working conditions because those are the learning conditions of their kids. What I said to the teachers that will be their voice in here today, because they're standing up being the voice for classrooms outside the building. So they've been doing this for 3 months now. It never should have gone on this long. This education minister has allowed this situation to drag on while everyone else pays the price. It's time to come to an agreement, send this to arbitration, so our kids can get back to learning in the classroom.
I know you haven't had time to dig through everything, and you're going to do that over the next number of weeks and months, but what stands out to you from the education budget aside from what we've seen and what's been discussed and already be announced by the Premier and the government as far as K-12 goes? Are there other areas in there that you're looking at? There's a lot of new school projects being announced. What have you seen in there that stands out?
What stands out to me is that this is a government that broke education. This is a government for a decade has been underfunding our classrooms. We've fallen from first in the country to now we might be in last place after this budget in per student funding. This is a government that's overseen all of those failures. They simply can't be trusted to fix it. There's nothing in this budget that makes me think that they're up to the task of fixing the needs in our classrooms.
Matt, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Adam.
That's Matt Love, NDP opposition education critic and a former teacher. So we are going to now go to Alex Kwan, who's with the president of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, Samantha Beacott.
Thanks, Adam. Samantha, What was your takeaway from the budget?
Well, nothing is really a surprise as of today because we had the Premier 2 weeks ago announce what the increase to education operating spending was going to be. It's unfortunate that there aren't longer-term commitments, meaningful longer-term commitments that are being made, and it's unfortunate that today we are taking job action. We've got 6,000 teachers down here, and that should show this government how important the issue of classroom complexity is and how important it is for teachers to have meaningful long-term commitments for their students and for their classrooms.
I just spoke with the education minister a few minutes ago, asked him, why is this not, why are classroom size, classroom complexity unable to go into a collective agreement, a new contract? He said it's just something that they're not going to budge on. What's your message? What's your takeaway from that?
There's no reason why it can't go into the collective agreement. We've seen half of the provinces across Canada already put articles into their collective agreement around class size and classroom complexity. Now, they're not ideal necessarily, but there's a step forward, and there's a meaningful commitment with teachers to ensure that their experience as well as student experiences in the classroom improve. The only reason this government wouldn't put something into the collective agreement is because they have no intention of continuing funding or improving the experiences of students.
Samantha, there is about, you said, 6,000 teachers outside. Do you think that sent a message to the province, to the education minister about how far you're willing to go, what you're willing to do to communicate that this is important to you, this is necessary in order to be addressed in the province?
I sure hope so. I mean, at some point, this minister is going to have to start taking the process seriously and start trying to find solutions. We're here, we're ready to find solutions, we're ready to work together with both government and SSBA to find something that works for all parties, but most importantly, what works for our students and ensures that they're getting the education that they have a right to. And unfortunately, there's no willingness from this government to engage in any of those conversations.
We heard just a few minutes ago, Hoopla was canceled officially. Can I get your response to that?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that that big tournament was canceled. I know that a lot of students were looking forward to it, which is why we put binding arbitration forward as an option to send classroom complexity to that. We would get back to the table in good faith. All of our job action would be canceled or suspended, and kids would be able to engage in those important activities. But there's lots of important activities that were canceled before this. I know skills was canceled, music festivals were canceled, other extracurricular activities were canceled. In the end, from what I've heard, SHSAA has planned a one-day kind of abbreviated tournament, so at least those students will be able to partake in the events. But in the end, if government doesn't take this seriously, this is about kids' education. That's what we're talking about. That's why we're taking action. We want kids to experience all of the opportunities within school and their extracurriculars. But at the core of our business is ensuring that kids have the skills and knowledge that are necessary to enter the workforce after high school. That is what the goal of education is, to give kids what they need to be successful into their future. And that means getting Saskatchewan what they need to be successful in the future too.
I wanted to ask you, there was a part of the budget, it means new high school, new elementary schools in Saskatoon, Regina. Obviously, like you've pointed out, necessary, but I guess my question for you, from a teacher's perspective, do you have concerns with that, or what are your thoughts on these new high schools being built and new elementary schools being built?
Well, capital projects are needed. We have schools where the roof is leaking, schools that are flooding regularly when it rains. We know that capital investment is needed. But at the same time, if they're only investing in capital and they get these shiny new buildings, they're not putting the teachers and the professionals that are needed in order to fill those classes and get students what they need to be successful.
Samantha, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Adam, back to you.
Thanks, Alex. I'm here with the Minister of Corrections, Policing and Public Safety, Paul Merriman. And what do you want people to know about what's being done in your ministry in this budget?
Well, there's a few things. The expansion of the remand center, because we do have some capacity issues within our correction facility. Certainly within policing, we're working with the RCMP to bolster the rosters within the RCMP. We're at about a 15 to 18% deficiency in RCMP officers in our province, and I'm working with Assistant Commissioner Blackmore to be able to help that. And on the public safety side of things, we could have another challenging fire season coming up. So we've been able to invest in some water water bombers that is $170 million over the next couple of years, which will certainly help in our northern communities to be able to protect the communities and the people up there.
What are you doing as far as preparation on there? We had asked the finance minister today about setting money aside. What was the discussion about putting money as sort of that lack of a better term, emergency situation for wildfires versus just spending that money when that presents itself?
Well, because we never know what the fire season's going to be. We know that there are going to be some challenges, so we do have some base funding that is in there. And if there's extra funding, we always are able to go back and get supplemental estimates, go back to the Treasury Board process and be able to fund that. That's what happened in the last few years. Hopefully it isn't a bad fire season that is coming up, but we started hiring back in January. Training started a few weeks ago. So our guardians of the north, so to speak, are up there and they're getting ready for the fire season.
Is there a contingency if other provinces have a need, like we saw last year, and Saskatchewan has at the same time? We can afford to send someone away, or a team away, or our resources away. What happens if there's a need everywhere?
We have interprovincial sharing agreements that if there's a hotspot, if Alberta, British Columbia, or Manitoba is experiencing some severe challenges, and we can spare those either the individuals or the equipment, we will do that. That's a long-standing agreement, and even international. We've sent troops internationally as well as that. But we need to be able to make sure that our equipment is at its best, and that's why we've been able to invest in the new water bombers that are coming out. They should be on the ground in Saskatchewan this time next year.
When it comes to the inquest, the James Smith Cree Nation inquest, and some of the things that were sent to the province that the province has jurisdiction over or some say over, there's been an ask for policing on some First Nations. I know that's kind of a shared responsibility. There's some federal government overlap there, or just their jurisdiction specifically. What can you tell me about how your ministry is working towards some of those recommendations from the inquest?
We had some high-level discussions in the fall with the federal minister. Right now with our First Nations policing, it's a 48 to 52 funding split. Now the expansion of First Nation policing, we have to renegotiate that with the federal government. As far as our government is concerned, we're supportive of First Nations having a police force in community. We want to make sure that they are integrated with our other police force, whether it be the RCMP, the Marshals, municipal policing, or other First Nation policing. We're very supportive of this. We've just got to work out the details with the federal government. It does take time, though. We have to train these individuals. We have to get them up to speed to make sure that they're safe. But it's always great when we have people that are able to patrol in their own community and know the individuals that they're working with.
What's the update on the Marshals? I know it's $7 million this year. It's kind of a plan to work things towards 2026, $20 million annually. Where are things at right now?
Well, we've hired our Chief Marshal as of January 1st to be able to come in and set things up. Now, this is an individual with 25 plus years RCMP experience. We have equipment that we need to buy. We have to look at locations that they should be stationed at. Where are the hotspots around the province, and how can we work with the local police, either the municipal or the RCMP, to backfill if there are needs there. We've had great meetings with SARM, SUMA, Cattlemen's Association. They all want to start seeing the Marshals out on the ground, and we've also been able, like I said, to invest over $13 million into the RCMP in last fiscal year, and we're able to continue to work with them this year.
Minister, thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, Adam.
That's Minister Paul Merriman, the Minister of Corrections, Policing and Public Safety. I know Alex has a guest. I'll throw it to you, Alex.
Thanks, Adam. Adam, I'm with Sarah Wright. She's a breast cancer advocate. I guess, Sarah, what's your response to the new breast health center in Regina?
I am so appreciative to Minister Hindley and our majority government. Last June, I sat on the corner of Hill Ave and Albert Street here in Regina with a pink piece of Bristol board, and I just wanted to make the breast cancer path better for ladies behind me than the path that I had to navigate. It's a lot of heartache and heartbreak, and it's so exciting. $3.5 million today announced for this new breast center. Minister Hindley has continued to meet with me since last year when he took over the portfolio. He's asked such amazing questions, and we have results. Like, this is democracy at work, and I'm so appreciative. To be a nobody holding a sign and standing here today with a new clinic coming is my wildest dreams.
You mentioned obviously making it easier for people in the future, easier than the path you took.
Correct.
I guess, what are you looking forward to most out of this breast health center? What are you hoping to see in it?
Well, I love that it's going to be a one-stop source of information for ladies as well as their healthcare providers. And that was a big part of what we talked about throughout the process of the dreaming of this clinic, was that our healthcare providers need as much support as the patients do. And so it's really exciting to see that this center is going to bring all of us together, and it's just going to be a much smoother process for ladies, take out a lot of the guesswork, which is very scary when you're waiting months and months between appointments. All of that ends this fiscal year. I'm just so appreciative.
What do you make of expanding the screening age as well? The screening age is now open for a wider age of people. Are you happy about that?
I'm thrilled. I started with my breast cancer symptoms at 37, and I didn't have a family history. I'm just a statistic. And so many ladies are going to benefit from this lower age because, things do happen. You just don't have that control. But so many ladies are going to be helped in the process so much sooner. They're going to have much better diagnosis. They're going to be able to have that support right from day one. The cancer may come, but they can get rid of it a lot faster, and they'll have answers so much faster. So really, it's amazing. And in the same token, the healthcare providers have new equipment. We have more healthcare providers coming to our province that the ministry has been actively looking for, and it's just so exciting. I'm starstruck, to be honest. This is to come together in only 6 months, or 9 months since I was standing just a block away from here, hoping to raise awareness. It's just a dream come true.
Sarah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Adam, I'll throw back to you.
Thanks, Alex. I'm here with Rhonda Blackmore, the commanding officer of the Saskatchewan RCMP. And what do you make of today's budget? I just talked to Minister Merriman about the need for more RCMP officers. What do you make of what you saw in the budget today?
Yeah, so there was certainly some increases in the budget, but I think more importantly, we've spoke with Minister Merriman and have a commitment from him that in addition to the budget commitment, to have a commitment to fund additional RCMP officers as we can produce them. We've seen a decrease, I would say, 2020, the pandemic, in training RCMP officers here in Saskatchewan, and an interest in policing as a career, but that is rebounding. We're seeing a dramatic increase in applicants. So as we can provide them, the minister has said they will commit to funding them, which is significant for us.
What would that mean to have that increased, number of officers to get to different communities, to have more staff, to have, I know a big thing has been made of, 2 people in a vehicle when possible. Would that help alleviate some of those concerns?
It would help us fill vacancies. It would certainly, it's significant for us because right now what we've been doing is having to reallocate funding from one position to fund an area that's, where there's more violent crime and addressing some of vacancies there. So that is huge for us to be able to fill all the positions instead of having to sort of pick and choose an area that might be quieter and take the funding from that position and apply it to another area. So it is really a game changer for us when we have a commitment to fund a significant increase to positions here in the RCMP.
I know we've talked about the Marshal Service. There's always questions about how they're going to work with the RCMP, with the municipal police forces. What are you looking for as far as information goes from the provincial government, how you can coordinate and not overlap or step on each other's toes? How is that effort going to be going forward with just a year and a half or so away from when they expect to have that up and running?
We're still really waiting to see exactly, what that looks like as it unfolds. And, to us, the important piece is that we're getting additional funding. We got some additional funding for operations today. And so that's really where our focus is. Once the marshals come on board, we'll see then how that works because it's not completely clear to us yet what exactly that means for us. But to be able to staff our frontline detachments and to be able to staff our specialized teams, our crime reduction teams, to make sure that they're fully staffed, that's huge for us, and that's really where our focus is right now.
Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Okay, thank you.
That's Rhonda Blackmore, the commanding officer.
A bit of help, whether it's on the security side or just check-ins a couple times a day, or those that need even more support who are dealing with addictions or mental health challenges, but being able to keep them housed with again a little bit of support from our great community partners. And we've seen good successes in the province with those programs previously. We just need, I think, to do a little bit more of that, and this budget comes forward with that $9.5 million, which is a significant investment there, as well as the complex needs emergency shelters for those that have unfortunately been banned from other areas of support, whether that's in the shelter system or living on their own, whatever it may be. Those who are really dealing with fairly significant challenges. We have that complex needs emergency shelter in Regina and Saskatoon. So those are some of the things we're doing. This is a challenge not only in Saskatchewan, right across the country, all throughout North America, and we're dealing with it. Thank goodness for our community partners who really step up and do a great job, and the individual workers in this sector are amazing. So thank goodness for them.
Minister, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Yep, thanks. Yep.
Adam, throwing it back to you.
Thanks, Alex. And we just had a slight interruption with our coverage here on the stream. So if you notice that, we're back now live. You can go back now and check it. We'll have the whole thing up for you a little bit later. That was Alex Kwan with Minister of Social Services Jean Makowski. We're going to wrap up our coverage here right away from the Rotunda at the Saskatchewan Legislature. Busy day here with the budget 2024-25. The big story, the government projecting a $273 million deficit, $18.5 million surplus for next year, $225 million the year after, and then $339 million the year after that. Here are the big numbers. Revenue projected at $19.9 billion. Expenses up as well at $20.1 billion. That gives you the difference of the $273 million. And then these forecasts are based on this. This is the end of the year, so not the end of the fiscal year, but the end of the 2024 calendar year. And a lot of things steady. The big thing I would note for people, GDP up 1%, and the potash price is lower than we've seen in the last number of weeks. Alex, we've been running around. You've been running around as well. Great job. We've talked to many different people, stakeholders, ministers, opposition. What's your big takeaway from what you heard today from some of the folks you talked to?
I had a chance to speak with the Education Minister, with the STF, with the head of the Saskatchewan School Boards Association. I think it's clear they're still very far apart from kind of coming to an end to this job action. Obviously, we know job action's planned until the end of this week, but from conversations with them, they're very far apart and not any closer to getting to an agreement where I think everybody will be happy.
And I think we heard from some political watchers, some experts who said they were a little bit surprised at some of the things that were announced, and maybe not surprised that a lot of the stuff we talked about leading up to this budget was already foreshadowed by the government. Education spending, some of the health announcements, revenue sharing. So those big things, no big ticket, splashy, surprising thing that we're hearing about today. I want to take a quick second to thank our crew, Anna May Zeviar, Kirk Fraser, Trent Pepler, Jenna Leith, Luke Lemoyne, Alex Kwan, myself, all of our team back at the station with CBC Saskatchewan, bringing you all this coverage. It takes a team effort to do this. We're very happy to bring this to you and be able to do this once again here from the legislature. It was, I also want to thank Adam Bent and Sam Samson, who are here in the Rotunda with us as well, and our colleagues from Radio Canada. So for Alex Kwan, I am Adam Hunter. For our whole team here with CBC Saskatchewan, this has been our 2024-2025 Saskatchewan Provincial Budget Show. Thanks for joining us. Good night.